Computer Gaming Addicts Anonymous is a fellowship of people who support each other in recovering from the problems resulting from excessive game playing. CGAA is not affiliated with any political agenda, religion, or outside interests. Our single purpose is to abstain from gaming to help others find freedom from the effects of gaming addiction. We have no membership requirements beyond the desire to stop gaming. Our groups share their collective experience and the principles that help them. Each of us is free to try out or disregard the suggestions of the program and other members. We have no professionals and no affiliation with any professional or government services. Our groups are financed by voluntary contributions from members and accept no outside funding.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff, and I am a recovering computer and video game addict. My story: I'm about to turn 57, and I've played games since games were available. And games were first available to me when I was about 15 in the local bowling alley. We played Pong, and that was the beginning of my my time gaming. Most of my life, I played games as a leisure activity, and I think most of the time, my gaming wasn't terribly addictive. It wasn't really out of control. It didn't interfere with my life any more than any other leisure activity would have, for the most part. But there were some early indications that lack of control was waiting right around the corner or sitting in the surface. The one that I recall that I had forgotten for a long time until I did my first step was when I had just graduated from college. There was this computer game, and I say computer game because you had to play it on the mainframe computer, which took up like a huge room. So it was a game where you sort of you saw something on the screen, and then you did something, then you entered it, and you waited for the computer to do something with it, and then you saw the result on the screen again. It was like every click took about 60 seconds or more. And then you would analyze what you had and try something else. And it was incredibly primitive, incredibly slow, and I completely dove into it. I mean, if I told you any more details about what it was, you would laugh. But I used to work all day on a Friday, say, and go out to happy hour with friends and go to dinner, and then get back home after dinner at 10 or maybe a little later, and then I'd go over and sneak back into the computer center on campus. Sneak in. I was not a student anymore. I had no business being there. A friend of mine gave me his professor's login information because his professor was never there late on a Friday night or Saturday night. And so I logged in as that professor and would play until 5 in the morning. So there I am, involved in impersonation and theft of resources and trespassing, just to play this incredibly primitive game that I could completely dive into. So certainly, it's not to say that I wasn't an addict, or even that I wasn't addicted. I may have been mildly addicted my whole life, but it really didn't interfere much until about 10 years ago, I had a nervous breakdown and things got really bad for me. And so after that, sometime after that, maybe not right away, because I was just, I don't know what I was doing. The first couple of years were just crazy after that. I was crazy. It was really bad. But I don't know how much I was gaming. I have very little recollection of that time except for pain. That's all I remember about that time in my life. And maybe that's all I want to remember. But later on, as I started digging my way out a little bit and, getting therapy and medication, I know I was using games and using them addictively, and my use of them got worse and worse and worse, and more and more and more. And to the extent that I began to have these little thoughts that I might be playing too much, and that I might want to control it more. And so I try to control it in various ways. Set a time limit, which never worked. Set a total amount of time for a day or a week. That lasted about 0 days. And I would say I'd play a certain number of games and I'd violate that. And I just constantly lied to myself about what I was going to do or what I did or what I was able to do or whatever. And at one point, I recall I gave my discs to my partner, the discs of my favorite games, and asked him to hide them in his things so that I would have access to them. And then I told him that maybe that he could give them to me on the weekends if I asked for them on the weekends, and then I could play on the weekend, and that would keep me from playing during the week and having it interfere with work. So that worked for a few weeks. I would play them on the weekends, and then of course it didn't mean I didn't play games during the week. I just played silly games, shorter games I could find easily online, free online flash games. But I didn't play my big favorites that would last 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours. And but then at a certain point, I don't know if it had been a month, I don't recall, but I just decided one day during the week that I wanted to play. He was at work. So I just rifled through his stuff until I found where he had hidden the discs. And after that, I would sneak them out. Now, this is crazy, but I would sneak them out, play the games, and then put them back before he got home from work. And then I would still ask him for them on the weekend so that he wouldn't know I was playing during the week. Now, you know what? He wouldn't have given them to me if I'd asked him for them. It was just nuts. It was just crazy. But it was my shame, my wanting to hide the amount that I played, the fact that I couldn't control things. So there was little to no control. It was really not good. And I played and played and played, and gradually, looking back, I realized that I gradually lost interest in everything else that I used to do. I stopped doing yard work. I really pretty much stopped cooking. I had really cut down on reading long before, but I completely stopped reading. And for me, stopping reading, that's just nuts, because reading is such a big part of my life for such a very long time. So yeah, all those things fell away. I stopped wanting to go to parties. My partner would say, "Hey, there's a party we can go to tonight," and I'd say, "Okay." And then it'd come time for the party, and I wouldn't want to stop playing games, and I'd tell him to go ahead and go on his own. So I stopped going to parties, stopped going out to eat with him, stopped going over to friends' houses to eat with him. Just basically withdrew into the world of games. I was avoiding the mess in my life, the pain in my life, the disaster in my life, which wasn't all created by games. But the fact that I didn't deal with it made it so much worse. And the not dealing with it certainly was a result of games. I didn't open my mail more or less for 3 years. I'd grab a check. If something looked super important, I would grab it. But most of my mail, I just couldn't face it. Or I thought I couldn't face it. I felt I couldn't face it. And I didn't face it. I played games. What happened is I found out years later that my therapist had been in her mind thinking about how she needed to get me into a 12-step program, but she was trying to figure out what the problem was, because she was like saying to herself, "This guy's not an alcoholic. He doesn't do drugs. What's his problem? He needs to be in a 12-step program, but what's his problem?" Eventually, she found out about the gaming because I told her about some of the stuff I was doing, and it was part of my life, my main leisure activity, or so I thought it was leisure activity. And And so she actually found the online fellowship for me and suggested that I go there. So I went, and somebody greeted me and invited me to a meeting. And at the meeting, I went, and people came to the meeting. It was a chat meeting, and so everybody knows how that goes. I was greeted, and people started sharing, and it was pretty amazing because somebody would share, and I say, well, there's a lot of similarities between that and me, and I could relate, and another person would share, and I could relate more and more and more. By the time the meeting was 2/3 over, I was saying to myself, I must be addicted because all these people who are addicted to games are describing exactly how I play games. So I must be addicted. And apparently my therapist had prepped me well because I knew that if you're addicted to something, you can't moderate it and you have to stop. So the next morning I played a little 10-minute game on my phone and then realized what I was doing and then just said, okay, that's it. And I started going to the forums and to the meetings and connecting with people and stopped playing games. And that was almost 3 years ago. That was May of 2012. And yeah, it was really the day I got my life back. The day I started to get my life back. It didn't feel like I got my life back for quite a while. I felt bad. I didn't have horrible detox kind of withdrawal that other people do. Some people have like a real horrible 3-day period or 5-day period or a week or 10 days. It's just awful. And then things start getting better. For me, somehow, even from the beginning, I knew it would get worse for a while as time went along. And it kind of did. It was a week or two in before I really started thinking, hey, I really want to play. And so I was just listless and restless and not doing very well for several months. After a couple of months, I had a gambling relapse. When I stopped gaming, I decided I'd stop gambling too. I didn't really think I was a gambling addict because I didn't go very much. I would go to the casino maybe once every 6 weeks or once a month or something like that. Looking back now, I can see that was slowly accelerating over time, but at the time, I still wasn't going very much. So there was no thought in my mind that I was really addicted to that. I just thought, it's kind of similar to gaming, and I'll stop that too. I didn't think it would be a problem. Well, a couple months after I stopped gaming, I let myself go to the casino, and after staggering from one slot machine to another for 5 hours, and until all the money was gone as usual. Um, on the way out, walking to the car, I realized that I had put myself back in the middle of the deepest gaming fog that I, had ever experienced, and the contrast was huge because I hadn't been in the gaming fog for several months, and I hadn't gamed or gambled for several months. So that got added to the list. I realized that playing slot machines. I mean, slot machines are computer games. It's the same thing. It just has this little money thing added. So yeah, so that had to stop too. And